Hey there, I'm Alan Matthews, and in this video we're going to be talking about practical musical analysis. There are many types of musical analysis. There's the kind that you do after you've had 4 college years of music theory class and you say, oh, the appoggiatura leads to the plagal cadence, and you do all these, everything, every single little note has its own special name and all this. That's not what we're doing here. What we're going to be doing in this video is practical analysis, which is how to, even if you're at the very beginning stages of learning classical guitar and playing pieces of music, that you can get useful information from the page before you start, or as you go, that will help you to learn faster and memorize more easily and practice more, I'm going to say more sensibly, in more logical chunks because of what you observe. So without further ado, let's get right to it. All right, so here we have a piece of music. This is study number 1. This is a study piece from the Woodshed program. And even if you don't read music, if you're just starting to read musical notation, this works also with tab, and we'll talk about tab in a minute. But you can glean certain information. So first off, you can say, you know, the 4 and the 4 here, the 4/4, what does that mean? What does that actually, you know, if there's 4 beats per measure, I'm going to be counting to 4, right? You can also just look at what are the basic rhythms. Is there anything crazy that I don't recognize? This is all quarter notes and half notes and whole notes. So you can just say, you can just notice, is anything looking strange here, right? Is there anything I don't recognize? Is there any kind of rhythm or anything like that that I don't recognize? You can also say, you can glance through and say, well, what's the highest note of the entire piece? And you just look through and say, is that it? There's a kind of a high note. Oh, there's a higher note there. Does it get any higher than that? I'm not seeing anything. There's another one of the same note. Nope, that's it. So that's our highest note. And what's our lowest note? You can go through and do the exact same thing. So therefore, you can get your range. You can figure out where on the guitar you're going to be playing this. If you see that there's a whole lot of stuff way up here and you don't read music very well up there, then you know that that's something that you're going to have to deal with in learning the piece. So you can look at that and just take it as information. You can also look at the textures. So here we have big old chunk chords, and then we have a little scale passage, and then we have some more chords, and then a scale, and here up we have chunks that have been split up like a boom chuck, and then a scale, and then another boom chuck, and then another scale, and then more chords. And so this is the texture of the music in this way. We can just see more or less what's going on. Now we can also look at, you know, are there big sections? And so because we've just looked at that, then we can say, you know, okay, well, it looks like we do this thing back and forth. We have chords and scale, then we switch it up and go, we like split up the chunks and then do the scale, and then split up the chunks and then do a scale, and then we go back. So then we can identify big sections just by looking at it and looking at just patterns, right? We're not looking at which chords they are or anything like that at this point. We're just looking for obvious things on the page. Like if you just blur your eyesight a little bit and see what pops out, then that's information. Then as we zoom in, so that's a zoomed out perspective of a piece, and we can do that very quickly oftentimes, just glancing over it, just taking it as information. Then we can zoom in and look at some more useful information, such as, what are these chords right here? So what are the actual names of the chords? Do I recognize this? So if I played them, what would it be? Is it a C chord? Then I'm going to write C right there. If it's a G chord, I'm going to write a G right there. It's that kind of thing. So looking for chords that you recognize, looking for things that you recognize. One of the main goals of doing an analysis on a piece is to identify chunks of information so that we don't have to go note by note and every single thing is separate than every other thing. Instead, it's chunks. Just like if I said, we're having a barbecue at Dave's house. Well, if you know Dave and you've been to Dave's barbecues and you know that, okay, well that means probably it's going to be this group of people, his kids will be there, there's that weird guy from his work, if his mother's there, then avoid her. You're going to know all this information just from saying barbecue at Dave's house. You'll know what kind of food there's going to be, you know who's going to be there, you're going to know the scene, what his grill looks like, all of this just from saying barbecue at Dave's. That's what we're looking for with the piece, is these discrete chunks that we can say, okay, C chord. And I know that that's a C chord. Even if it might be that we only play part of the C chord, it's still, I can think of that as a chunk in my head. And I can know what chords play nice with C if I know that information. And then I can expect maybe there's a G in there as well. in the Woodshed program, there's a lot of recognizing chords, partial chords. So this is one of the things that you can do is whenever you're learning your chords, notice that it's not just, that this isn't just a C chord, it's also just those couple of notes, or those 3 notes, or those notes, or however they go together, then that can always be, that can, all together can be a C chord. So as you go on, you can just get better and better at this analysis game. So we have chords, and we can identify it. Let's look a little bit closer. Another thing we can look for is right hand patterns. So we've looked for left hand patterns that we know, just whatever it is that we know, we're looking for something that we know in the left hand. We can do the exact same thing with the right hand. So with this piece here, then we can say these are PIMA chunk chords. So I'm playing all 4 notes at the same time. And then whenever the scale comes in, I'm doing I and M alternation. And those are the 2 things that I'm doing through there. And then it goes back and forth. And then you can look for, okay, well now here, whenever we get to here, then it's doing this. And you just look for these patterns that you know in your right hand. And if you're working with just primary arpeggio patterns in the building blocks, small patterns, then you can put these together and then start noticing how they join. It becomes a vocabulary of sorts. And then there's another scale, and then there's that. So you can look at what the right hand is doing through there. So now we have this idea of what the chords are doing, or what's going on in the left hand, what's going on in the right hand. You start to see how they work together. And then you can use that when you're practicing. You can split them and play just the left hand part, just the right hand part. Always looking for ways to take multiple notes and make them into one little chunk, one little package of information. And as time goes on, then it can be entire sections can be that little chunk. Oh, I know that this, those 4 measures right there just are this type of thing. It's that chord progression with that right hand pattern. And all of a sudden you can memorize pieces much more quickly as you get better at this game. Let's do another one. This is green sleeves. So we can look through this. We can say, what's the roadmap here? Are there any repeats anywhere? Are there, is there anything I should know about? Well, it looks like it just goes straight through 1, 2, 3, 4, no repeats or anything like that. So we can just, that's one thing that we know. Then we can say, okay, well, let's take a look at these chords. We're in 6/8 time signature, so we're going to be counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What's going to happen? So this is just a zoom in of the first line. Well, then we can start looking at, well, look, there's a chord, and there's a chord, and there's a chord. So what are these chords, right? How do these chords work? Is there a bass line? Oh, look at that. That seems like a bass line. What's happening there? So we just start looking at these things and figuring out how we can think of it instead of 4 notes. It's just one thing. It's just a G chord. And you can do it just as easily using tab. You can look for shapes that you know. Here are the chords, here are the chords, here are the chords. Just look at it, put it on. It might be the entire measure, or like this right here goes in to make an A minor chord. So it might be a couple of notes put together. But you can start looking at it in your hand. You can look at your hand and say, what chord am I making right now? It's an A minor chord. Okay, well let's just make a note of that, do it as A minor, and that way I know what's going on. So it doesn't mean that you have to have any kind of super musical training or anything like that to do a musical analysis. The main thing is that you just look at it and see, what can I recognize? What can I bring that I already know to this piece? What can I recognize in this piece that I already know is a better way of saying it. Right, hope that helps. Please subscribe to this channel. I look forward to seeing you in the near future. Bye.